You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Wednesday, August 27th. The dust has settled just a little bit on the 49ers 53-man roster. Of course, it's the initial 53-man roster that came out yesterday, and already we've seen some changes to that roster, which is why I decided to wait just a little bit to do this show. But also, we now know who's on the practice squad. And John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan spoke with the media today, so we've got some updates from them. So pretty action-packed show today, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you like this video before we get started here. Let's talk about the 49ers roster, shall we? So want to focus on the offense first, and these updates are with the last updates that came in from the last day or so. So some of these updates happened today. So you're looking at Brock Purdy and Mac Jones as the quarterbacks, of course. So they only keep two. Christian McCaffrey, Brian Robinson Jr., Isaac Guerendo, Jordan James, Kyle Juszczyk are your five in the backfield. Then you have tight ends George Kittle, Luke Farrell, Jake Tonges, and wide receivers. Wide receivers was the most interesting group that we had. We have Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall. Originally, when it was announced, we had Sky Moore on there and Jordan Watkins. So since then, some of the additions that we've seen now, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who the 49ers signed today as a free agent. He was deciding between the Steelers and the 49ers. He chooses the 49ers, so that's a good sign for the 49ers, and they need bodies for week one at the very least, and maybe at least the first 3 weeks of the season. So Marquez Valdes-Scantling, someone with a pulse, so that'll do. And then Russell Gage, who initially did not make the 53-man roster, has been re-signed since. Jacob Cowing, who initially had made the 53-man roster, was placed on IR today. So procedural move there. And Jordan Watkins makes the 53-man roster. So you can see some of the notes that I put here. Cowing placed on injured reserve. Russell Gage is set to be signed by the team. That is not official yet, but should be happening very, very soon. And Marquez Valdes-Scantling, that is official and reported quite widely. And as noted, Brandon Ayuk is on the reserve PUP list. Demarcus Robinson is serving a 3-game suspension. Those guys won't count against the 53-man roster. Just a second, guys. I got to let my cat out. I told her before we went live, I was like, you gotta leave now or forever hold your peace. Well, she's yapping away here, so I'm going to let her out for 1 second here. The joys of having a pet. Steve-O, you're always giving me some crap about my white tees. I didn't used to be a white tee person, but in the last, 6 months, maybe a year, I've grown into them. I really like a good white tee now. They're crisp. They go with just about anything. It's just a clean, classic look. So yes, I would advise you to get yourself a white tee. But moving on to the offensive linemen now. So we got Trent Williams, Ben Barch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, Colton McKivitz, Spencer Burford, Connor Colby, Drew Moss, Matt Hennessy, Austin Pleasance. So a lot of offensive linemen, and a lot of people were very pleased to know that Drew Moss made the 53-man roster. That's big. I think had the 49ers let him go with the initial 53-man, that he would have gotten poached by another team. Now, we do expect that there will be other moves that the 49ers are going to make, in which case I think Austin Pleasance or Drew Moss could or Matt Hennessy even, could be one of those guys who are in danger of being waived at some point or cut at some point, later in the season, or maybe, as soon as the next couple weeks, if the 49ers decide to make more moves, which I wouldn't be surprised, especially with the wide receiver group still being somewhat in flux. Let's look at the defensive side of things as well as special teams. So defensively, you got defensive line, Nick Bosa, Alfred Collins, CJ West, Michael Williams, Yetro Gross-Matos, Bryce Huff, Sammy O, Robert Beal Jr., Kalia Davis. Evan Anderson had originally made the 53-man roster, as did Jordan Elliott, but Evan Anderson was released today, or was waived today, because the 49ers claimed Jordan Jefferson, another defensive tackle, off of waivers. He spent the spring with Jacksonville, former LSU defensive tackle, and apparently just saw this come across on Twitter that the Bengals had also put in a claim for Jordan Jefferson, but of course 49ers were ahead of them on the waiver claim order and priority. Interesting enough, the 49ers didn't claim a wide receiver, which I think a lot of people thought that maybe they would. I wonder if they put in a claim for Trey Palmer, formerly of the Bucks. He was awarded to the Saints, who I think had the priority before the 49ers. I think they had the waiver pick right before. So he goes to the Saints. But yeah, I'm just curious. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the 49ers put in a claim for him as well. But those are the defensive linemen. I wouldn't be surprised if Evan Anderson goes back to the practice squad and we can see him return there. As far as the linebackers who made the 53-man, Fred Warner, D. Winters, Luke Gifford, Nick Martin, Tatum Bethune. Some people thought that, Curtis Robinson would make the 53-man. Some people thought that, who's the other guy? Chaz Surratt. Some guys thought he would make the 53-man roster. Well, neither of those guys did. Curtis Robinson made the practice squad. Chaz Surratt signed by the Seahawks. So, interesting enough, the 49ers signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who just most recently was with the Seahawks. And the Seahawks get themselves someone who spent the spring with the 49ers. So, I guess that's even. Revenge games coming. All right, the safeties that made the 53-man roster: Jason Pinnock, Marquez Siegel, Jair Brown, Richie Grant. Malik Mustafa, of course, is on the reserve PUP list, so he does not count against the 53-man as of right now. And then the corners: Diamador Lenore, Renardo Green, Upton Stout, Chase Lucas, Siren Neal, Darrell Luter Jr. Again, people thought that maybe Darrell Luter Jr., his time was done. I have been saying through most of camp that, I thought Darrell Luter did enough to stick around, and, he does. And I don't think he's safe forever, but as of right now, he's on this team. I think special teams is really what kind of saves him and gives him value on this team. So Darrell Luter makes the 53. As far as special teams goes, Jake Moody, John Weeks, and the 49ers rolled out their initial 53-man without a punter on the list, which, a lot of people thought was curious. Thomas Morstead was released, but of course, and we've seen this a couple times already from some other teams. For example, the Lions released Dan Skipper, their offensive tackle, their sixth man of that offensive line, you might say, highly coveted. And people were surprised that they let go of Dan Skipper, right? Well, obviously there was an agreement between the team and the player to have him return. In this case, same thing goes with Thomas Morstead. It's not like people are dying to sign punters right after, they're released. So Thomas Morstead does get re-signed to the 49ers, and that happened after Jacob Cowing was moved to injured reserve. So all in all, I'm not super surprised by the moves, I think the only surprise was Sebastian Valdez being left off. But then again, could you really be surprised? Because there's at least one player at cutdowns who has a really good camp, really good preseason that 49ers just can't afford to keep. This year, they didn't have to release as many of those guys because they need all the help they can get on this revamped roster. But Sebastian Valdez, the victim of a very, very deep defensive line group for the 49ers, I believe they kept 11 defensive linemen. So Valdez, the odd man out. But the good news is, and this is where I pivot to the practice squad. So Sebastian Valdez makes the practice squad. All is right in the world. No 49ers were poached. Any of the ones that were waived, none of them were poached. So I think that's a good news for the 49ers, but I think it's also indicative of how the league probably thinks about the 49ers right now. No one's clamoring for 49ers players, like they have in years past. And again, just kind of the result of the 49ers revamping this roster and, maybe falling out of favor across the league as far as, guys getting poached. But that's a good thing that Sebastian Valdez is able to stick around. Some other guys who able to stick around on the practice squad: defensive lineman Travis Gibson, defensive lineman William Bradley King, linebacker Jalen Graham, Curtis Robinson, corners Eli Apple and Derek Canteen. And then on the wide receiver side, you got Junior Bergen coming back on the practice squad. You got Robbie Chosen, who was one of those releases. People were a little surprised that Robbie Chosen was cut as well, but he was available as a free agent for quite some time before the 49ers signed him to begin with. So I think they figured Robbie Chosen, not in any way, shape, or form, a threat to be poached away. So they let Robbie Chosen go, brought him back to the practice squad. I think that's a good move. I think you see Robbie Chosen brought up and activated for that week 1 game against Seattle. And that alleviates the wide receiver issue just a little bit. And of course, the fact that they brought back Russell Gage as well. Wide receiver Malik Turner also makes the practice squad. And the 49ers bring in a new face here, running back Sincere McCormick from the Raiders. So that'll be interesting. They always like to keep a running back on the practice squad anyway. I think they would have probably liked that to be Jeff Wilson Jr., but Jeff Wilson Jr., who was released, was able to sign with another team right away, and that would be with the Dolphins. He signed with the Dolphins practice squad, actually. So there you have it. Here's a quick note for everyone to remember. At any point, a practice squad player can be poached by another team. And as such, the 49ers can also poach another team's practice squad player to their own team. The caveat to that is that it has to be a player signing to the active 53-man roster. So as of right now, you're not going to see teams do that, really. But once we get into the actual season and injuries start to happen, that is something that could take place. So theoretically, if the 49ers run into, let's say, some injuries in the wide receiver room, and I'm going to knock on wood just for good faith. If they run into any issues with injuries in the running back room, sorry, did I say wide receiver? I meant running back. In the running back room, and they want to sign someone else to their active roster or running back, they can sign Jeff Wilson Jr. off of the Dolphins practice squad to their 53 if they want to. Theoretically, just saying it's an option. Jeff Wilson Jr. isn't gone forever, unless, of course, the Dolphins do end up signing him onto their 53 at some point. But there's some options there. For now, 49ers running back room is pretty set, and I'm a fan of the group right now. All right, let's get back to this practice squad. So Nick Zakelj, he lives to see another day on this practice squad, as does Drake Nugent. Both of these guys, of course, give the 49ers at least some versatility. I know we're not huge fans of Zakel, but they definitely still want to groom him as a potential center, right? They've been giving him shots there too. Drake Nugent as well. So, I think they like having that option out of those guys. Then tight end Braden Willis, who of course lost the TE3 battle. He makes it to the practice squad. And another new face here. And as John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan indicated, they were going to be signing another quarterback to their group. So the practice squad, Adrian Martinez from the Jets. McCormick and Martinez, those signings to the practice squad have not been made official yet. But assuming that those happen, then the 49ers have just one spot left now on their practice squad. And like I said, I think the one that makes the most sense is Evan Anderson, who they just waived. So assuming he clears waivers, I think they'd like to have Evan Anderson back in some capacity. So expect for that to happen in the next day or so. What's going on? East Coast Red and Gold. I know there's a lot of live shows happening right now. Of course, a lot of 49ers moves to kind of parse through. A lot of people going live. Appreciate all of you that are tuning in with me. Make sure you like this video if you haven't yet and hit the notification bell so you know the next time that I go live, right? All right, so the next thing we're going to go over here, the Jauan Jennings stuff, because when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan were at the podium, not at the podium, but when they spoke to the media today, of course, they got a flurry of questions regarding Jauan Jennings. And I don't know if it's because they expected Jauan Jennings questions that even at the start of this presser, I could just tell John Lynch just had a very peeved tone and look to him. Like he just looked irritated right out the gate. And I mean, this situation I think has been irritating to the team. I think it was irritating to them with Brandon Ayuk. I think it was irritating to them with Deebo Samuel. I think they hate to be going through this again. I think they hate getting the same questions when the focus should be on the 53-man roster and, oh, we're excited about all these new players that we've got, and everyone is hung up on Jauan Jennings, understandably. And they're a week and a half away from week one. Those are the things they want to talk about. But of course, this Jauan Jennings thing, unresolved situation is still lingering on. And so we did get an update from John Lynch as far as the status of Jauan Jennings right now. So I'm going to roll the clip for you guys here.
Are you convinced when he is healthy that you'll be ready to play?
Well, there's a lot that goes into that, Eric. Ideally, everybody has a training camp. Everyone's out there. That's a perfect world. But, he's been putting in work to the side, and we'll have to make that judgment when the time comes. The other thing is both things can be true. He wants a new contract and he's got to hurt cap. So I think people want to assume one or the other. Both things can be true.
All right, so as Lynch says it, both things can be true, that Jauan Jennings has a calf injury and that he also wants a contract. Sure, just seems like a very weird strategy by Jauan Jennings if that is the case. It could... I don't want to speculate too much. We've speculated plenty on this situation. The 49ers remain adamant that he's still working through this injury. That's the story that they're sticking to. Another thing that they're saying now is that, well, they're not trading Jauan Jennings. Of course, that was one of the questions they got today. John Lynch was asked whether Jauan Jennings has requested a trade, to which he said, quote, "A while ago he did, but that was a long time ago, and we've moved on from that. I'm not getting into when it was, but it was a while ago," end quote. Well, that's interesting that he would say that, because I don't know if you guys recall, but I certainly do, because it wasn't that long ago. It was a little over a month ago when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan were talking to the media, and they were asked specifically if Jauan Jennings had requested a trade, to which Kyle Shanahan said this.
Has he formally requested a trade?
You know, I saw the same tweets you guys saw, but like I'll just stick to what I said. Jauan's here. We expect him to be out on the field.
Yeah. So he hasn't formally asked for a trade. Yeah. No.
What's your understanding of Demo's legal situation?
He
right now?
hasn't formally requested a trade, is what they said on July 22nd. Today, it was a different tune from Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, when they did say that he has requested a trade, but it was a long time ago. Well, if it was a long time ago, I think we would have expected that they would have said that a month ago. Because I would think a long time ago is further than a month ago, personally. Look, teams lie to the media all the time, but maybe like keep track of your lies so you don't contradict yourself a month later. Just maybe. Again, not surprising that they would lie. It's just, maybe write them down so you remember what you've lied about. So Jauan Jennings has requested a trade at some point, but the bottom line is they've moved on from that. And a little bit later, John Lynch made it even clearer that they're not doing that, as in they're not trading Jauan Jennings. I don't think they want to. I think they want him out there. I think they kind of need him out there. And I think they know that at some point, Jauan Jennings is going to have to play. That's his best shot at getting the money that he wants, whether it's from, I don't think it's going to be from the 49ers, but if he wants to get paid from another team after this season, when he's a free agent, he better play, right? And on top of that, like I've been saying, at any point, the 49ers can stop playing nice, and if he is cleared, he's going to start to get fined. That hasn't happened yet because he is injured with this calf injury, but that can change. So still, his status for week 1 still seems truly up in the air. The 49ers continue to say that the expectation is that he's out there, but then when talking about the injury, it's all very vague and muddy. So I can't say for certain that Jauan Jennings is going to be out there for week 1. I think we should all mentally prepare for him to not be out there for week 1. And the wide receivers available for that game likely being Ricky Pearsall, Russell Gage, Robbie Chosen, Sky Moore. I feel like I'm missing someone. Marquez Valdes-Scantling. There you go. Those are your week 1 wide receivers until we learn otherwise. So that's a deal with Jauan Jennings. But here's the interesting thing, too. I don't think the 49ers are necessarily done trying to improve their wide receiver situation, even with the signing of Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I think they could always do a little bit better with this situation. Enter Kendrick Bourne, who was released by the Patriots today. Yeah, not at 53 roster cut down time, but a day after. I think had he been cut yesterday, the 49ers probably would have liked to sign him over Marquez Valdes-Scantling. But instead, the Patriots do it today. And, well, for what it's worth, Matt Mayoko did say that the 49ers have, quote, high interest in bringing back Kendrick Bourne after being released from the Patriots. Not surprising. I mean, someone who knows your system, someone like Kendrick Bourne walked so that Jauan Jennings could fly in this offense. Like, to me, he is the original. He is the original 3rd and Jauan. So if they find a way to bring him back, I think that would be ideal. Of course, there's like the Patriots also released Javon Baker. The 49ers are interested in having him on the practice squad. Why do you say there's zero chance he comes back? Do you think, Steve-O, do you think that Bourne has no interest in coming back, or do you think the 49ers don't want him to come back? Here's what I think. I think if the 49ers does not bring him back, it's only because they can't afford him or another team simply offers him more and they're just not willing to match that. The 49ers want players at their price, and we know they could be very stingy. So I think that's like the only situation. There's going to be other teams. There are going to be other suitors interested in Kendrick Bourne. So if it comes to that, then yeah, that would be my reason for thinking that Bourne doesn't come back. But I guess we shall see. And I just realized I spelled reunion wrong on this slide. Love that. There we go. Quick fix to the slides. Thank you, Canva. All right. Let's pivot now off of the wide receiver Jauan Jennings situation, and let's now talk about Jake Moody, who the 49ers were asked about in this presser as well, as you could imagine. And I got to say, I got to admit that I was wrong on this. I thought that the 49ers were done with Jake Moody. And I did predict that he would make the 53-man. However, I did also think that the 49ers would, a day later, when, again, all these other kickers became available from other teams releasing them, I thought that the 49ers would look to sign one of those kickers and release Jake Moody today, But that didn't happen either. And not only that, but John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan seem to still be very much on the Jake Moody train. Here's what John Lynch had to say about him.
How do you think Jake Moody did this preseason?
Well, I think it was an excellent competition between him and Joseph. I think Kyle spoke to, we didn't want that competition to end, but anyone who says it wasn't a competition, I don't really agree. I think, the coaches, the special teams coaches are always charting everything. So you see what you see in front of everyone, and then they're doing things to the side. And Jake had a really good, preseason. I found it interesting after, having a hell of a game in Las Vegas that, a lot of people still have questions. And I guess that when you had a season like you did last year, those things are going to be there until you put those, you kind of put that away. And, we got a lot of belief in him and understand that last year was rough, but that happens in guys' careers. Our confidence and belief in him is what we see out here. But I will say everything's earned in this league and everyone's got to go prove it each and every game, each and every year. And so Jake understands that.
Yeah, of course, we all want Jake Moody to prove that he's not the 2024 version of himself. Of course we do, John. We just haven't seen that yet. As long as he continues to miss kicks, all of that is going to come back. We're not going to put it behind us. And I don't know how the 49ers put it behind them so easily. It's crazy. They're going to let Jake Moody cost them a game in the regular season because I just know it's happening. And if it doesn't happen, happily will eat my words at the end of this season. But they're going to let Jake Moody cost them a game this season. And then they're going to retroactively correct their mistake. Actually, not retroactively, because it's not like you can undo the past in this situation. But they're going to try to make it right by then releasing him after he would have cost them a game. When I think this preseason and this training camp has kind of showed you enough, personally, that's what I think. But they have a very long tolerance for Jake Moody. I mean, far more than any of us could have. I mean, he was getting booed. The home crowd was booing Jake Moody in a preseason game. Imagine in the regular season how bad it's going to get when he's out there and he misses a kick. I don't know if he can recover from that. Yeah. It does feel like roster politics. The 49ers aren't usually quick to admit their mistakes. I think this is one they want to be right about. I think this is one where they're so nervous that Jake Moody is going to then get signed by another team and have a successful career after that. But let's be honest. I mean, at the end of the day, he's a kicker. Like, let's not lose sleep over this. Like, seriously. But anywho, that's how the 49ers feel about Jake Moody. Seems like they're going to go into the season with Jake Moody as their kicker. Feels like they're comfortable with that. I'm not, but I'm just a fan. Who cares? I'm just a Payne fan. And as a Payne fan, I will reserve my right to boo Jake Moody from my couch if he misses a kick. Or at a game if I'm there. But all right. I know we've been talking about Jauan Jennings and the uncertainty around him. Then we just talked about Jake Moody. On a more positive note, let's get into something a little more positive now. Injury updates. And you would have never guessed that injury updates could ever be positive with this team. But I think today we did get some pretty good news on injuries. So let's talk about it. So Upton Stout, as well as Jordan James, 2 rookies we're excited about. They both returned to practice today. Ben Barch, Kyle Shanahan did say they hope to have him back on practicing Monday. And as for Dominic Pooney, similar, although he kind of just left it as hopes to have him back next week. Kind of said it'd be great if it were Monday, but hopefully Wednesday. So there's no specific date that they're targeting for Dominic Pooney, but the hope is that he's back next week, which of course puts them both on track for week 1. Seems like the team is pretty optimistic about that. As far as Yetur Gross-Matos, who was removed from the PUP list that he was on for, quite some time, the Kyle Shanahan did say they hope to have him back next week as well, and that week 1 is possible. Though I think for Gross-Matos, it's probably not as optimistic as maybe Barch and Pooney, but with him having missed so much time this offseason, the spring, I mean, I'll take a possible week 1 return for Gross-Matos. I feel like that's a step in the right direction for him. And obviously the 49ers feel really good about him being on this roster and being a contributor on this team off the edge. So with that, guys, I'm going to end this show by, again, keeping it on the positive, because I want everyone to hear what Kyle Shanahan had to say about, just in general, like the outlook that he has on this year's roster.
Where are we at? I don't know. It depends on how good we get as this year goes. We lost some good players, but I think we've filled them with some guys who are capable of becoming those guys and hopefully became capable of becoming better. Is that going to happen right away? No, it never does. But can it happen this year? Can it happen by week 4? Can it happen by week 8? And those are things that we're optimistic about. You want to have good luck with injuries and everything like that, which can't control all of that. But I'm excited that we have options in this building. We have young guys to work with, and we have a bunch of players who have been successful in this league who I still believe have a number of good years ahead of them too.
All right. So I think that's a realistic approach to this roster. It's like, hey, there was a lot of turnover. There's a lot of new faces on this team. We know that things aren't going to click for everybody right away, but we do have a lot of hope that the guys on this roster are capable of being just as good, if not better, than the guys they're replacing. I think that says a lot. And of course, like, you would imagine they'd think that. I would hope so, right? With all the moves they made in the offseason, the successful draft that they had, how many of those guys made the roster? And not just that, like how many of those guys that made the roster as rookies that are poised to have big roles, starting roles for a lot of them. So wanted to end the show on that positive note, because especially after talking about like some of the injuries and how, it seems like guys are beginning to come back from some of those. I'm going into week 1, and I think we all could go into week 1 with a more positive feeling around this team than maybe we had a week or two ago. And that could change quickly. Sure, like the season comes with its own set of problems and new injuries and all that. But the reason I'm excited for this team is because I think it just makes it's a different kind of exciting because we're going to get to see guys develop and grow. For example, it was so awesome to see Nick Martin in the preseason games. You see the improvement from the game 1 to game 2 to game 3. I can't wait to see that in the season, like to just see how these guys are growing and developing in real time. I think it's going to be really awesome. I think we'll have a great appreciation for those players, and we'll come to love this team for being what it is. And that is a completely different team than it was a year ago. But with that, folks, I'm gonna leave you all for today, Wednesday, August 27th. We talked about the roster. We talked about the practice squad. Jauan Jennings updates, some injuries. Jake Moody's still on this roster. Tomorrow on my YouTube, I'm going to be going live with Mariah. So again, make sure you guys hit that notification bell so you know when I'm going to go live. Make sure you like this video if you haven't yet. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. Really appreciate it. But for now, folks, have a good rest of your Wednesday.